Welcome to the Healthy Careers Podcast, where we help healthcare providers succeed on purpose. We take a conversational approach in learning from others who have been there and done that. Join us as we share expert insights from real people who are just like you, because we believe that success isn't just a destination, it's an intentional journey, and you don't have to do it alone.
All right. Welcome back to the Healthy Careers Podcast. I'm your host, Madison Loomis, and today I have Jen Kern with me, who I'm excited to introduce because she has been in this space for 37 years and has been specifically in orthopedics for 17. So I'm excited to hear from her today, learn from her expertise within this field, and talk about a bunch of different rabbit hole conversations and ideas.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Awesome. So to open up the podcast, I like to ask something that just kind of allows people to get to know you and your personality. So tell me about something that you've done that others would find you crazy for.
So I actually am a true crime podcast fan, and
Okay.
I was listening to a podcast about wrongful convictions. And as I was listening to it, I firmly believed that the person that was incarcerated for murdering someone was innocent. And on a whim, I flew down to Texas, drove to the prison in Houston, spent a couple of hours with the inmate. My husband thought I was absolutely crazy for that. And I'm happy to report that 5 years ago, he actually was exonerated, is in home with his family. He's a grandpa. I've been down to celebrate birthdays with him and his wife and his kids. So I'd say that's probably one of the craziest things I've ever done. Because as a female, I went by myself.
I was going to ask that. I was going to say, like, okay, so who went with you on this journey?
Just me.
Okay. All right. And you weren't nervous at all?
No. Not at all.
Okay.
It was probably one of the most humbling moments I've ever experienced. And when it was all done and I left, I legitimately cried the whole 2-hour drive back to Dallas because I firmly believed he was innocent and I had to walk away and leave him there.
Wow. So I can always take this off this podcast too, because I'm so curious to know kind of like how you were able to put that together. But I guess if you are into the true crime thing and you like to do those puzzles of, you know, actually how this happened or what, but that kind of stuff personally is not for me. But I do actually know somebody that wrote a crime book, and I'll have to share it with you. He's actually an APP as well. He's a neurosurgery PA, and he wrote a book, and he loves the true crime stuff. So I'll have to
you'll have to definitely let me know.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Cool. Well, excited to talk about a few different things I know we've chatted about offline and just kind of the landscape of healthcare and specific to orthopedics as well. So I guess first and foremost, explain kind of how you got into this space and then what drew you to, you know, I guess 15 years ago at this point, move over into the orthopedic side and really stick within that realm.
Yeah, so my mom actually was a medical office manager in ophthalmology as I was growing up, and my dad was a pharmaceutical salesman. So everything in our house was healthcare all the time. So at the age of 16, I started working part-time and in the summers in the ophthalmology office with my mom. And so I was a front desk secretary, and that was back when you hand wrote the HCFA forms and, you know, you had paper charts and all that kind of fun stuff. And she actually got into a car accident, which caused her to lose her leg. And so while she was out, I had been working so closely with her that they kind of actually just had me. This was when I was a few years older than that, probably about 24. They had me start managing the office in her absence. And she wasn't able to return, unfortunately, and they actually hired outside for the permanent office manager job because they felt that I was too young, not necessarily in maturity. They were looking at age. And so they then made me the billing manager. So I learned all about billing. And I
Cool.
spent
Okay.
about 7 years in that practice. And then I had an opportunity to move to another ophthalmology practice and be the office manager. And I spent a
Okay.
couple years there. So total of 10 years in ophthalmology. And then I moved over to primary care because it was a bigger group. So even though it was still an office manager job, it allowed me to work with, more people that were reporting to me and kind of, enhance my skills with a broader group of people. I
Okay.
spent 6 years there, and I really thought that that's where I was going to end my career. And
Okay.
the doctor was married to a vascular surgeon, and she actually got the job to become the chief of vascular down at Duke University. So they packed up and they moved. And
Wow.
I then went into GI, which I'll be honest with you, I didn't really care for that. It really is a crappy job. And then
Yeah.
I really didn't care for the specialty. And it was at that
Yeah.
point that I interviewed for a spine surgeon, and I became employed by him in private practice. So all of these jobs up to this point have been in private practice back in
Okay.
2007. And in 2015, he actually sold the private practice to Rochester Regional. And that
Okay.
launched me into a broader area of orthopedics as I started moving up within the service line with the health system. And so,
Got it. Okay.
that at that point is when I got involved in more kind of understanding of the general orthopedic realm.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think I said 15 years, but it's more like 20, right? That you've been within orthopedics.
17 it'll be this
Oh,
summer.
17.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Somewhere in between. Well, that's incredible. And I'm sure you saw, like you said, the differences between different specialties of what that role looks like and the different responsibilities within them. And then I'm sure you also saw a difference from going from that private practice space into more of a larger regional hospital system. So I'd love to hear kind of your take on that and what was maybe some of the biggest differences for you.
So admittedly, I really struggled joining a health system because all of a sudden now, it's like you went from being the one who, if you needed to purchase something, you just purchased it. If you had the money, to then you've got to go through this whole hierarchy of approval. And then there's more layers of leadership. When you're in private practice, you make the decisions, you move forward with it. So you really have to learn to partner with multiple different people, come up with strategic plans, right, to get all of these things done. And I, admittedly, probably for the first 6 months, I just didn't like it. I liked being the ones making the decision. I really did. And the director at the time said to me, I'd like you to kind of pull back and take a different perspective. And she told me that what you have to look at within a health system is, yes, there are challenges, but you have such a bigger network of support around you that you don't have to be the one that knows how to do everything now. And I thought about it, and really it was a light bulb moment. And I really did shift that perspective. I owned the fact that this is where we are now, and I could choose to leave and private practice is going away and then have to re-ingratiate myself how many ever years later that I come back into a system, or I can own it. I can learn it. I learned how to navigate challenges better than I ever had before. And I do have a phenomenal support system with all of the different departments that we have. And you think of healthcare as providers, but you've got your quality department, you've got your HR department, you've got your payroll, you've got your billing. And like all of a sudden, all these people that do these things
Mm-hmm.
every day that you can lean on to help you navigate
Yeah.
the challenges. And again, I'm 9 years into the system now, April 1st. And
Wow.
I love it. And I wouldn't go back to private practice with all of the different challenges that are out there in this day and age
Yeah.
at all. I
Yeah.
really wouldn't.
It is an interesting perspective because I actually, before starting my own business, I worked more so of what you would call like an HR business partner within HR in talent acquisition corporately. And it is so true because I worked both in startups and larger corporate firms. And when I transitioned from being in a role where it's like you wear all the hats, and so it's like you are the admin, you are the receptionist, you are payroll, you are employee relations, you are talent acquisition, you are all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go into a role where it's like, oh no, we have a separate department for that one specific thing, right? So like you don't have to do payroll anymore because that payroll department does it. And you don't have to handle benefit administration because they do it. And you
Mm-hmm.
are only responsible for talent acquisition. And you're like, okay, like it takes a minute for you to kind of say, okay, I don't actually have to do as much. And I guess that's a good thing. And it's just kind of a mindset switch of let
Mm-hmm.
those people do what they were hired to do and you focus on what you're an expert at, right? Because
Yep.
when you're so used to doing all of it, you can't be a master of all of it. You just simply can't, right? There's always going to be pieces of it that you are either naturally or innately better at, and or you just prefer doing those functions more so than others. Like for me, payroll was not it. I did not want to do payroll.
I actually have a former coworker that is originally from Wisconsin, and she moved
Mhm.
here because her husband moved here, and she, joined us at Rochester Regional, and she had always only ever been part of institutional medicine. And he got a promotion that sent them back to Wisconsin, and now she's in private practice, and she's struggling because she is the one that has to
Yeah,
do all of those things that she's never done before. So she actually
exactly.
really misses institutional medicine at this point.
Yeah, and I would argue that it probably made you look like a rock star, right? Like when you come in, you're like, I can do this, I can do that, I can do this, I can do that, because you're so used to it and you're used to it at a faster pace at times too, that everyone's like, who's this chick?
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
Why is she doing everything? And why does she know how to do everything? And so it's also like kind of giving yourself a pat on the back of like, okay, you can chill out a little bit, right? Like you're
I
just
know, right?
responsible for this piece of the pie now.
Yeah.
But I think, it's good to have perspective of both because there's beauty in both of those things. I often find when you're in smaller companies and there is no process and policy, there's easily ways for things to fall through the cracks, a lot easier and to kind of miss those gaps. Whereas when you're in a larger company, the reason why you silo those things is so that it's perfected and there's process and policy and you go from A to C seamlessly, at
And
least
there's so
most of the
much
time.
risk without policies in place too. So,
Yeah, especially in medicine,
mhm.
and when you've got over a certain amount of providers and you're seeing over a certain amount of patients, it's just, yeah, you need to have your checks and balances
Yeah, agreed.
for sure. Awesome. Okay. And did you find that within orthopedics, there was a difference in what you were doing in comparison to the GI side or ophthalmology? Or you
Yeah,
said
so sorry, go ahead.
the first specialty you were in?
Ophthalmology.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is definitely differences simply because the scope of my role is so large now. And,
Mm-hmm.
when I was in private practice, it was one or two offices that I was responsible for, just the
Yep.
providers and the staff that functioned in those roles. In my current role, we have about 274 employees in the orthopedic service line
Wow.
department. We have 9 main office locations, but a total of about 26 across the region. And
Wow.
so, and we also just bought a hospital system that's about 4 hours north of us that we're kind of integrating in. And so I'm much more involved in not so much the daily operational stuff that I have practice managers that take care of, but
Yep.
strategic planning, creating and working through budgets, coming up with different processes and workflows, working through standardization, which is very, very difficult when you have people who are doing so many different things. And, all of our orthopedic offices were private at one time. And so now we're trying to unify how we do things, unify a brand. It's challenging. So, it's more, like I said, it's strategic thinking and planning than I've ever done in any area that I've worked in healthcare. And if you had told me 37 years ago when I was a teenager that I'd be sitting in a senior leader job coming up with the plans, I would have laughed, because that's just not normally how my brain worked,
Yeah.
But you learn.
You do. And I think your story is a fantastic example of moving up the ranks and just remaining, I guess, consistent and patient with the process, right? Because so many people, they want to make the move. And I'm guilty of it, right? In my earlier career, before I started my business, like I'd get to that 1.5, 2-year mark, and I was like, I want more, right? Like I want to do more. I want to feel more challenged. I want to get the new title. I want to get paid more. And then you realize sometimes just staying put and learning to kind of just stir the oatmeal, if you will, from day to day and deal with the things that come up leads to things down the road. And you look back and go, oh, if I had left, right? Like you said, if I had gone and made the change back to another private practice rather than staying here, like where would my career taken me? Would the trajectory of it have been completely different? Probably so, right? And I think everything happens for a reason, right? Like I have no regrets about places that I left or stayed, etc., because now I love what I do. But it is just such an interesting thing to sit there and go, I wonder what would have come of that.
Yeah, and I'm in a unique situation being in the role that I'm in as well, because it does require advanced education. And I have a high school diploma, and that's it. I became a mother very young at 18, and I didn't, have the opportunity at that time to attend college. And it's been really through sheer hard work, and self-learning and just having the drive to do and be more. And technically you shouldn't be sitting in a position that I sit in without a bachelor's or a master's degree. And they even went to our HR department and changed the verbiage in the job description to bachelor's degree preferred so that I could go into the role.
Wow. Well, that's good though. I'm glad that they didn't call the fuss about that, because I'm a huge component of, I understand with clinicians, with providers need to have a certain level. Like you don't want a spine surgeon that's like, I just got my high school degree. But I think for a lot of positions, it's about the personality, it's about the grit, it's about the attitude and the willingness more so than the degree, because I've met plenty of people that, and I hate to say it, but even people that have medical degrees or people that have PhDs and MBAs. And I'm like, where's your common sense? Where is your work ethic? Where is your logic at right now? Because there is none going on.
I actually say common sense. One of my favorite sayings is common sense is not a sense common to all.
Nope, it's not. And business savviness too, right? Like my parents are both business owners and entrepreneurs, and they have teaching degrees. I mean, they have their degree, but they're not rocket scientists, but they're smart. They're not maybe book whizzes. They're not people that are going to go and do brain surgery. And I think a lot of times in medicine, people will equate each other based on their level of education. And so I love to meet people that kind of like beat that norm or that statistic.
I mean, I'm surrounded by people with advanced degrees, and they're like, oh, you need to join FACHE. I'm like, I don't qualify.
Hey, that's okay. You're still doing a great job. And
that's right.
You saved a lot of money.
That's right.
Think about it.
Yeah, it's funny because even the docs will say that. I mean, they obviously out earn us, but when they talk about the debt that they have, it's just insane.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a true crisis happening right now in healthcare. I think it's most prevalent, and I see it because, I mean, docs make good money. They can pay it off eventually if they're wise and don't try to live as if they've been a 10-year, practicing doc versus
Yeah.
somebody coming out of residency or fellowship. But I meet some people that are physical therapists, and when they change that whole thing from being,
Masters,
just
yeah.
a bachelor's degree to
Doctors.
now, master's, and now it's a doctorate, and
Mm-hmm.
they're graduating with $200,000 in debt. I mean, some of these schools in Boston are charging $75K a year. So you triple that, and then they're coming out and making 75 grand a year. Like, that's a little, they're never
Yeah.
going to be able to escape that debt with interest.
They just changed it for athletic trainers too. They have to have a master's
Really?
now instead of a bachelor's, and they come out making like 42,000.
That is ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're better off starting your own business and doing personal
Mm-hmm.
training
Yeah.
online,
Yeah.
in my mind. Which is, unfortunate, but I think that is kind of the key with a lot of these programs is if we lowered the cost of schooling, like especially for, I know we were talking about this and I want to kind of segment into this of like the aging population of docs and more docs moving into specialties because they can make more money. But you look at primary care and you look at, the aging population of physicians and healthcare access as our kids get older and you look at that and you go, what if we lowered the cost of what it took to become a primary care physician? Would we have this huge gap or this huge void of them?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of people choose to specialize because they're like, well, crap, I can't get out and just make, 250 and be able to pay off these loans.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting topic to kind of think about, like, what's the solution at
Yeah,
this point?
and you're right. We need to figure it out because we are in crisis.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, especially even with some of I have a thyroid issue and it's, trying to get an appointment to see a specialist for that. I think somebody told me like 7 months to see an
Mm-hmm.
endocrinologist.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I need help before then, please.
Yeah. I got a thyroid issue too. See my scar?
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. Did you have yours removed?
Yeah, I had thyroid cancer back in 2006.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that you're good now, but that's scary. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild. Like, and I think there's so many people too, from a primary standpoint of when you have that gap, then it's like you're not really acting preventatively or proactively towards your health either, because it's
Yeah.
like, okay, now great, we have a million of these specialty docs for once it progresses to the point where we need them, but how about the preventative measures and check-ins and all of that?
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we have specialties changing in ortho. You alluded we were going to kind of, move into this. So I've got a situation here particularly where we've got orthopedic surgeons that are 55 and over, and then we've got orthopedic surgeons that are like 40 and under. So, in the next 5 to 10 years, the more seasoned providers will be retiring and aging out, and they were more generalists. So any orthopedic condition you could go see, they could treat it. You needed a hip replacement, you needed a knee scope, you needed a hand surgeon, like they could do all of that. But medicine and orthopedics particularly has really changed in that, people are now going and getting fellowship trained. So they're getting fellowship trained in adult reconstructive. So these doctors are just doing hip and knee replacements. There's, upper extremity. So they're doing shoulders and elbows, hand surgeons, trauma.
And invasive spine. Yeah.
Yep. Sports, invasive spine, spine deformity even. And so, you can't go to this, Dr. Smith who you saw for, you broke your nose, you broke your finger, you needed a knee scope. Now you really have to understand and find who does what it is that I need help with. And I think the way that we've kind of developed things here is, we rely very heavily on our APPs, right? So they're very good at diagnosing everything and then understanding who it is, if it's surgical, that they need to refer them to. So it's a different model. I think APPs have gained a lot more respect. For what they're doing. It's no longer taboo to say, oh, they're making me see a physician assistant. We just have so many incredibly talented APPs in the orthopedic department. If they were allowed to, I'd let them operate on me. That's how talented they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they do assist in surgery with our surgeons as well. So they do know exactly from start to finish how to care for the patient.
They do. Yeah. And a lot of times too, especially when I want some questions answered and you go, I'm like, I would almost rather see a PA or an NP because I know that they're going to have more time with me. Right. So they're going to truly be able to see me for, whether it be that 30 minutes or, maybe 20, with the exception of, you getting your vitals taken by an MA or whatever. But for the most part, like, they're sitting there with you. They're not coming in and going, oh, okay, bye. You know what I mean?
They look at you.
So, they know your name. They're not like, so I love this one at Dr. Ruxin. They're like, nice to meet you, Madison. And I empathize with them because it's like reimbursement rates with the way they are. It's like there's no other choice. They have to move through it and see as many people as possible. But you also have to keep in mind that these are people with problems and they're here at sometimes on their most vulnerable days, and they want help, their standard of living or how they're at, they need that, and they want somebody to feel like they're listening and empathizing with them. And so I think APPs are such a blessing to the healthcare just ecosystem. But I also see there being some issues with like pay discrepancies. A lot of the APPs that I talk to, they're like, hey, wait a minute, if I'm billing the same things that the doc is so that the doc can be in surgery or so that the doc can be playing golf, how come I'm not getting paid, accordingly? And so I think that's going to kind of be the next, or it's already a hot topic, but kind of the biggest next thing is how do we retain the APPs to not just go jump to the place that's throwing more money at them or resorting to locums or travel positions.
It's funny you say that because we are actually exploring moving our APPs more to an incentivized compensation model.
Yeah.
So, our surgeons are paid based on productivity, how much they generate, RVUs, all of that, kind of fun stuff. And so we are exploring that for our APPs as well.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the move that I've seen a lot of my personal clients move in when they're like, we can't motivate them, or like they're not seeing as many patients as we want them to. And I'm like, well, have you thought about incentivizing them for that volume, right? Because if you look at other industries, you look at recruiting, you look at sales, you look at anything where your production is a measure of your compensation. If you tie that type of thing, well, then you're going to see the people that are super hungry and motivated for that. They're going to outperform and they're going to see the more patients.
And I mean, even in leadership, we're incentivized. We have, key KPIs we have to meet every year in order to bonus and stuff like that. And, we're paying attention to them all the time. We're looking at the data every month, trying to figure out, where do we need to do better? So, I think there's nothing wrong with that because, we have a saying in ortho, you eat what you kill, right? So whatever you do, you're being reimbursed. It's pay or blind, which is also good.
Right. Yeah. And I think another thing that one would question, right? And I think about this from a recruiting perspective is a lot of these mega staffing agencies, they'll do the same, right? And most recruiters are paid a lower base and then a higher commission scale for the placements that they make. And it's hard to do that in medicine though, because a lot of recruiters even, and this is kind of the opposite of what I focus on, is like, okay, well then I'll just sling 10 resumes to them and there's my 10 submissions for the week. And it's a numbers game. And I didn't really review these people. I didn't make sure they were a good culture fit, that they would stay long, that what I was doing was of quality, but it looks good, right? Like, and it's a number and it's a bigger number than the other person. And so also looking at it from a medical standpoint of like, okay, you saw 40 patients, 30 patients in the clinic, but what does those patients have to say about their time with you? Did they
Mhm.
feel like they were rushed? Did they feel like they were listened to? Did they have a good experience? Because then it's like pushing RVUs could actually harm you in the long
Mhm.
run.
Exactly.
Because you want people that return and who refer you rather than say, you know, go there. They don't really pay attention.
Yeah. I saw your post on LinkedIn about the resumes and sending, the 3
Yeah.
quality versus the 10, and that resonated with me quite a bit. So,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and it's just more time effective and working with a lot of high leaders. It's like they don't have 10 hours to interview
mhm.
all your people that you didn't even take the time to vet out. And that's what people pay us for. So like do your job and do it well
Yeah,
and
I
take the
agree.
extra time versus just slinging resumes to say, well, I sent you 10 people. Did you like any of them? It's like, no, they all sucked
Yeah.
actually. And now I don't have those 10 hours back.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree.
So, yeah. Awesome. And I think another thing that I wanted to ask your opinion on, just because you've been in this space long enough that I'm sure you've seen this kind of shift happening where there's a lot of people that were clinicians or providers now moving into purely operational or business side of the house. And I think a lot of people look at it as like that's the goal, right? They want to get out of the clinic. They don't want to see patients anymore. And it's like not all that glitters is gold, and that
Mhm.
there's also challenges on the other side when you move
Mhm.
from a clinical position to an operational role. And I'd love to hear your thoughts kind of on that and what you feel like advice you'd give to somebody that's looking to make that shift or make that change.
Yeah, so actually, my vice president was an APP um,
Hmm.
in spine surgery. We actually were in
Okay.
private practice together. I was his boss, and now he's mine. And he actually went and got his executive MBA. He
Hmm.
won the Simon's Games, it's called. So he got it for free. He's incredibly
Oh, wow.
intelligent. Yeah. And he moved into operational leadership. And, in the APP patient care space, very well
Hmm.
liked, very well loved, good clinician, listened, cared. Everybody appreciated him. And I
Yeah.
mean, we appreciate him in the operational space, but what he's finding is that when he has to make those difficult decisions that not everybody is going to agree with or like,
Yeah.
right? Because I told him early on when he moved into it, I said, you know how to know if you're a good leader? And he said, what's that? I said, not everybody likes you. And he was
Yeah.
like, wow, really? And I'm like, there's a lot of pushback that will come at you if people don't like the decisions that you make. They'll get angry
Hmm.
with you. So I think, you know, the advice I would give is if you want to go into operational leadership and leave clinical practice, what is the reason? Is it
Hmm.
because you feel that your clinical and operational background together can help move the needle forward and make things better? Or do you think that it's going to be easier because maybe standing over an operating table for 13 hours as you're aging is getting more
Yeah.
difficult? Like, what's the true reason?
Motive.
And and if it is because you think that clinically and operationally together you're going to bring a lot to the table and you will move that needle forward, that's great. And it's
Hmm.
true. Like it's really enhanced the role with his background, but
Yeah.
you have to have thick skin because you are going to be yelled at. People
Hmm.
aren't going to like you. He actually laughs all the time at me. He was like, they just insulted you. I'm like, I don't care. I've been being
Yeah.
insulted for 37 years. Like, it does not bother me.
No,
So, it is challenging.
it
Um,
is.
so I guess, that overall would be the advice. Figure out why you really want to do this, because if you can't define that, it's not going to go well.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think a lot of people too, like that burnout factor, they think that making a change is going to solve the problems. And sometimes I'm like, well, maybe it's where you're working, right? So from a recruiting standpoint, I'm like, do you feel like you're not being valued? Like, have you voiced your burnout? Like, maybe you can advocate for there to be more people brought on board to alleviate that. Or if there's hasn't been those conversations about, okay, like this is what's happening with the clinicians, and oh, we lose somebody every 6 months, or we'll train somebody up and then they're gone within a year and a half. And to me, I'm like, that's not your issue, right? Like that stems from when you hire somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't voice it, it can't be fixed. So being solution oriented, of like not being afraid to have those difficult conversations. And if those difficult conversations don't go anywhere, well, then maybe that's your kind of motive to make the change, and or at least earn a seat at the table. But if it's purely just from the standpoint because you're like, I'm sick of seeing patients every single day, and I think that somehow moving over to the operational side will be a lot more comfortable and lackadaisical of the role, like you're in for a whole new set of challenges and
Mm-hmm.
personality types that like you are no longer the good guy. Like you have to play bad cop most days, and you have to make decisions in a way that are time effective and sometimes not the right decision. And then you've got to be able to have a backup plan and fix the problem in a time efficient manner too. So it's like, it's got its own set of challenges. And I think a lot of people just want to make that quick move because they're burnout. And I don't think that's the right way to do it.
Yeah, I actually had a conversation with one of my practice managers a few weeks ago, and they really don't like conversations that appear to cause conflict, and
Mm-hmm.
they will, kind of passively aggressively email a staff member. And I pointed out that that's disrespectful to the staff member. And,
Yeah.
if you enjoyed having a conversation that could be considered conflict, I would think poorly of you. Nobody likes to have them, but it is
Right.
necessary for
Yeah.
your success as a leader, but as for your employees' success in their role. And
Yeah.
he said to me, "You've never seemed to have a problem having those conversations." I mean, he's worked for me for 14 years. And I was like, I don't like having them, but they are necessary. And when you
Right.
move into a leadership role, it is part of your responsibility to have those conversations. And you have to be honest
100%.
with yourself. If you can't, then this isn't the role for you.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people too, when they have those conversations, they so easily like go from 0 to 100. And I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the best skills or skill sets, soft skill sets you can have as a leader is being able to have those conversations and remain like this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you've got to be able to deliver the message of like, hey, this is what this data tells me, right? Be prepared for the conversation. This is what's been going on. Here's what I think needs to change, or like, here's the solution. And then, like, what are your thoughts on this?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than it be this escalated, like heated thing. And I learned that from HR, sometimes you have to talk to people about some pretty serious stuff, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
means of their job being their job or them getting fired. And you have to do it in a professional way where you can get them to be at your level as well, to where it's like, we're just having a conversation. It might not be a fun one, but it's still just a conversation, right? Like it's not a reflection of my character, your character. Like it's just business, and that's it.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
have
that's something
found
that I
if
think
I
a lot of
start a
people miss.
conversation like that, saying, I just want to let you know this is going to be a challenging conversation, it actually eases their mind because they're not like watching the build up.
Yeah, exactly. And they're seeing it as like a reflective mirror, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you don't ever get above where you're at, well then they don't feel the need to. And even when like they do start to escalate, you can be like, hey, it's okay. Like we're not here to fight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Like
exactly.
just tell me how you're feeling and we'll find a solution. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
here to create more problems. And I think um a lot of times, a lot of people are passionate about what they do. And when they're coming from that clinical side, they also
don't really know how to handle that, because with patients, they might have great bedside manner and be able to diffuse a patient. But then on the leadership side, it's a lot different when it's a VP or a C-level executive that you've got to have that conversation with.
Yeah, agreed.
So awesome. Well, this has been fantastic. I think, the insight you shared on just the aging population and kind of how we can combat that, and what's kind of to come for the healthcare landscape of what we should be doing, and kind of how to also support the APPs as time goes on with that aging population and different clinical models and bonus structures. And then also just sharing with us, your successful journey into being in that leadership space and kind of defeating the odds with not having all the fancy degrees. I love that. I think that makes you even better of a leader because of that. And, I hope to stay in touch and hopefully have you back on to talk about how things have gone maybe after you guys have implemented some of those things.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. All right. Until next time, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Healthy Careers Podcast, where we provide a platform for you to ask hard questions and get real answers. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends. Stay tuned for more episodes every other Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern.